comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California, pushing on the doors of life marked pull and fighting the unholy trinity as we go. Big business, organized religion, and government.
I am back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, the Zigzag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco and across the moat from Oakland. Northern part of California, what I consider to be the greatest state in the Union, and I have an old guest. She's not old. She's kind of middle-aged, but she's been on before in a previous carnation. I'd like to welcome her back. Here she is, Claire Hall. How are you?
Hey, Ralph, I'm great, and thank you for having me back. It is always great to be on the program.
Always great talking to you, and I want to tell you that you can argue with me as to what the greatest state in the Union is. I have two choices. New York could be one of them. California could be one. But you're up in, if you'll excuse the expression, God's country.
Oregon. Yes.
Oregon.
The land of... How did I end up here? It was a lucky accident of birth. Born here in September of 1959.
Okay. Did you ever consider living anywhere else, or did you travel anywhere that appealed to you and you say, wow, I'd like to be here, I'd like to be there?
Oh, gosh. I've spent a lot of time in the great state of California, spent a year in graduate school in Chicago, Illinois. I've visited New York, been to Washington, D.C. several times, other states briefly, and, all beautiful places. But I have just always felt rooted by family, by geography, by history. I truly feel like I am an Oregonian in my very basic soul, and even if, perhaps some future chapter of life leads me away from here, I'll still think of myself as an Oregonian first and always.
Wonderful. Nice to have that kind of an upbringing where you're happy with it. You're not discontent, and you're not looking for another place to live. That really is nice.
Well, thanks.
What were your parents like? Because this is going to lead us into your story, and it's a story of transition. And I want to know what was instilled in you that gave you the inordinate courage to do what you're doing, and which one of your parents, if not both, were the influences that enabled you to live life as you damn well please? And that's
great question.
My highest compliment, by the way, Claire, because if you're doing in life, and this isn't just related to what you're doing, if you're doing what your passion is, or what you're truly guided to do, and only the one that's guided can determine that, you have my utmost respect and admiration. So.
Well, thank you. And that is a great question. And I would say both of my parents were significant influences on the person I have become today, and in different ways. My mother, Jane, she was a legal secretary in the years between high school and her marriage to my dad. They were married in 1951, and in that era, she chose to become a wife, mother, homemaker, full-time. I had one sister, Kathy, born a few years ahead of me, and sadly we lost her many, many years ago to a brain tumor. But I think, from both of my parents, both my mother and my father, one thing they instilled in me was, I think, a real hunger for learning. My mother was a voracious reader. My dad, not so much, perhaps in part because he suffered a traumatic brain injury, among many other injuries in World War II. But, they both highly valued education. They both took tremendous pride in my accomplishments when growing up. They were both always there for me whenever I needed them. My dad, there's an amazing story too. My mom was a native Northwesterner, born in Spokane, Washington, but her dad got a job in Portland when she was 2 years old and spent the rest of her life in Oregon. My dad, from him, so many influences, and some that I'm just still unpacking now. In my work as a county commissioner, I've shown a great passion for, and I hope been able to accomplish a few things for helping people in poverty, and in part that's because my father grew up in the worst of poverty during the Depression. Grew up on a dirt farm in rural South Dakota. He was teased by the other kids in school because, his parents could not afford to buy underwear for him. And my grandmother made underwear for him out of potato sacks. And when he had to change in gym class, the other boys teased him and he cried. When World War II came along, he enlisted in the United States Marines, was a decorated combat veteran, came home with many wounds, a 90% disability rating, the Bronze Star, 5 Purple Hearts. But he instilled in me always do your best, always strive for your best. And, even though he had been a star athlete and a decorated combat veteran, he was never the type of man, and I appreciate this more and more as the years pass, he didn't try to mold me into his image. There was no an athlete, that I become a soldier. He just took great pride in my academic achievements. And, at one point, he said to me, with no malice at all, but just some real insight into my personality. This was in my teen years. He said, "You're a lover, not a fighter, aren't you, kid?" And I laughed and I said, "Yeah, Dad, I think I am."
He may have been complimenting you beyond belief.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Because anybody who's gone through any sort of war realizes that that's not what we were made to do as humans. It takes an adjustment to become warlike, and there's no adjustment at all to being a lover or to loving. And you tend to gravitate towards what's natural, which leads me to, again, your transition. It's, for those of you out there who are under a rock or something, must realize that Claire is transitioning from manhood to womanhood. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Sure. Before
I ask you what brought it on, when did you know about all this stuff, I'm more interested in knowing your experiences is womanhood what you expected?
Yes. The short answer is yes. I mean, as we speak, 10 weeks into the public phase, but it is everything I expected and more. And, being transgender is something that I find a lot of people still haven't had experience with, but a few years ago, less than 10% of the population said they ever had met or known a transgender person. Now it's up to 40% and climbing, but still this is brand new to a lot of people. And let me say, the fact that I get to grow my hair out, color it, wear makeup, wear jewelry, wear colorful clothing, all of these are things that I delight in, especially after having had to deny it myself for decades. But, that I don't know if everybody will be able to wrap their minds around this idea, but that is not what makes me a woman. That is an outward expression of what I've always felt and the way I relate to other people, the way other people relate to me. That has fundamentally changed me in amazing ways. So many people have said, who've known me for a long time. Well, one of my closest friends, he was my first boss at my summer job when I was 15 years old. That's 43 years ago. He said, "You seem like the same person, and yet like a tremendous weight has been lifted from your shoulders." And I think that is totally correct. Another person I've known in the community for many years, not as well, but more in, I think, kind of, community, social type settings. He approached me recently, congratulated me, and said, "It's always seemed like there was a wall around you, and now the wall is gone, and now I understand why." And I think that was a very true insight as well.
Well, that's good friends that can enable you to look inside of yourself, and it's nice when a good friend really knows what's going on.
Yep.
That only that can bring intimacy. Everything else is, like you say, walls that we build up and appearances, be that with clothing or material things. All of it is part of it. When you say a tremendous weight was lifted off of you, can you elaborate on that for a second or two?
Sure. I'll do my best. That until I was able to start on this path and then actually make the transition, I've got to say I did not realize how difficult it was for me to live in hiding, to live in denial to a certain degree, to conceal this very essential part of who I am, that I think I always lived with a certain burden, I don't know, of, even though the rational part of my brain said there was nothing shameful about it, I think the irrational part always kept telling me, you can never disclose this, the consequences would be too negative, too severe, people would not accept it, you would be laughed at, hated, or shunned. But, now that I'm totally out there, I think the fact, let me veer off a little bit, but I still think in answer to your question that I'm going to say about 99.8% of the people who I've known have been astonished by this, because I think I did a good job of tamping it down, hiding it, pushing it to the rear of my mind. But nevertheless, it was always there, always something I was carrying every single day. So, I think if that helps to get at the essence of what that was like, now that I'm out there and I'm saying to the world, here I am, all of me, no more secrets, no more shame, love me, hate me, ignore me, but that is tremendously freeing and liberating. And, among the things I hadn't expected, I thought for other trans people that they might look at my story and say, okay, she did it. Maybe that's one more sign that I can do it too. But even people who aren't trans or aren't close to somebody who is, they're looking at it as something that gives them hope as well. And that has really been gratifying to me, because I have had so much support, encouragement, love on this journey. To be able to pay it forward just a little bit, is very gratifying.
Was there someone that you met that was a transgender person and kind of greased the way, if you will, kind of pulled you over, or just helped you decide, or have you known transgender people? What was that about?
Well, I've been very lucky. There is one woman I've known for more than 30 years. She transitioned 14 years ago. Another woman, I'm going to say I've known her for about 10 years, and she transitioned male to female about 3 years ago. So, I followed their journeys with empathy and support, and until I actually made the decision to transition myself, I didn't disclose to them, but once I had made that decision, they were among the first people I came out to, and they have been great, I was going to say, both informational and emotional supports and friends. And, they've had very different life experiences. I mean, we all share the common bond of being transgender, but, the fact that they have been part of my life for a long time and, have been able to be very, very open and supportive of me, and sometimes, help me get back on track when I've been feeling a little, lost, discouraged. They have been, very valuable members of my team.
Okay. Has the religious community, the church community, played any part in anything that you're going through, either positive or negative? I don't know how close you are with that.
Yeah. Well, just personally, I was away from organized religion for many years, but within the last year, I have joined our local Unitarian Universalist congregation, a bunch of social justice warriors like me. It's a small group, maybe about 40 people, and I already knew about half of them. And, I would say it's a more spiritual group than organized religion per se, but the first tenet of Unitarianism is that we affirm the worth and dignity of every person. So, that was the first larger group I came out to. They have been wonderful. I do have friends who are in the clergy of what you would call more the mainline Protestant tradition, a Presbyterian minister, a United Church of Christ minister, and an Episcopalian minister, and all three of them reached out to me very early on to essentially say that they probably figured I'd be facing some pushback from certain elements of organized religion, but they wanted to know that as far as they were concerned, and in the Bible, they read that, God absolutely loves me and wants me to be happy and wants all of us to be happy. And so, that's been a source of further strength as well.
Claire, have you had moments of doubt?
No, and that is the interesting thing that, because before I got into elective office, I was a journalist for a long time, and I always think I've had a pretty analytical mind that, I was telling a friend just the other day that it's almost like not only am I myself, but, it's just come to me recently. It's almost like I've been watching myself as an observer for most of my life, but it's really been heightened these last few months. And basically, I made the final decision that, yes, I was going to go forward with this last December and set a target date of the first weekend in June, which I fulfilled. And along the way, the Claire observer self was asking, gee, I wonder as the date gets closer, will I have any doubts? Will I have any cold feet? Will I get nervous at all? But no, it was just like every step I got closer to that date, I felt more and more confidence, and a couple of months out, I started counting off the days, and then that final week, I was actually counting the hours. And when I woke up that Saturday morning and said, "I am Claire as of today to the whole world, and will be for the rest of my life," just the overwhelming sense of joy and even more so peace was amazing.
Heartwarming story, I'll tell you. Did you name yourself after Claire Ruth?
I didn't, although, certainly that's an appropriate linkage, the wife of the greatest baseball player of all time. But actually, I picked the name Claire when I was about 10 years old and just read a story, and I thought, it's not a family name or anything, but I just thought it was a beautiful feminine name, and I made the resolution right then and there. If I could ever be a girl, I was going to be Claire.
Wow, I don't have to die curious now, because that's the first thing I thought of when you came out, and it didn't surprise me at all. I was just happy to see you having an adventure that may lead to your, just what you said, total peace of mind. Wow.
Yep.
How freaking cool is that, my friend?
It is amazing, and I just wish everybody could experience this. And if there's one person listening, whether they're hiding the fact that they're transgender, whether they're gay, whether they have been abused, whether, they're dealing with an addiction, a mental illness, I don't know, any kind of secret, anything that brings a sense of shame or sorrow. I know there's a lot of obstacles to dealing with it. I mean, I spent most of my life coming up with excuses why I couldn't transition until, finally the switch flipped, and I said, gee, all of those were really BS, at least that's how they, and instead of finding reasons not to, I kept, I said, what is stopping me? What have I been waiting for? One of the friends I mentioned, longtime trans friends, and I'm talking to her on the phone one night, a real heart-to-heart, and she is opening up to me in very intimate, very personal ways about the struggles she had to overcome to transition, and as opposed to my 6 months from decision to actually going public, for her, it was more than 3 years. And I'm just writing in my journal, and I still look back at this. This was very early on in my process, and I just wrote in big block letters and underlined it several times. What the hell am I waiting for? But it is amazing that after all my life thinking all the doors were slammed shut and bolted tight, not only have they all flown open, but it's just been amazing. It seems like the right people have appeared in my life at the right time. When by last fall, when this was something I'd been doing intensive reading, thinking, researching, that I thought, this is very probably what I want to do, what I need to do. One of the things I found online was, it's really valuable to find a therapist specializing in gender identity issues. And, I'm in a pretty small town on the Oregon coast, and of course there weren't any here. I'm about a 3-hour drive from the big city in Oregon, Portland, and I was afraid I might have to go up there, but luckily I was able to find someone in Corvallis, just, the home of Oregon State University, and really only about an hour's drive away. And, she was happy to take me on as a patient, and very quickly we reached the mutual conclusion that, this is what I wanted to do, and really even more so what I needed to do. And then that led me, of course, to finding a nurse practitioner who could provide hormone replacement therapy, an electrologist to eradicate my beard, a stylist right here in Newport. Somebody told me, go find a woman named Liz Rose who owns a certain salon. And even though most people I've broken the news to, I've been people I've known for a long time, but when I sat down with her in early January, I said, well, Liz, this is probably a strange conversation opener. We've never met before, but I named the mutual longtime friend who had steered me to her, and I said, I got to tell you, I'm transgender, looking at living full-time as a woman beginning about 6 months from now, and can you help me with the growing out phase and finding a brand new style that's going to work for the new me? And she was delighted. I mean, it turns out that she really has a passion for the LGBTQ community. Every year she goes to the New York City Pride Festival, which I guess is kind of the mother of them all, and said if I can make it next year, she would love to be kind of my tour guide and den mother, and so I'm hoping that that's going to be possible. And it's been such an amazing journey, and yet I know it's just beginning.
Wow. Hey, Claire, you mentioned 2 words in your diatribe, and that was small town. Have you come up against small town mentality?
Not directly, only indirectly. As I mentioned, I was born in Portland, grew up there, moved here in my late 20s. And so a lot of people think that being here on the central coast of Oregon, that I would be dealing with that. But actually, this is a place where, a couple of our communities actually have a visible and active LGBTQ community. It's, because of, I think it's such a glorious location. A lot of folks from the Willamette Valley, Portland, Salem, Eugene, tend to retire here, and I think they bring with them maybe more politically liberal and socially liberal attitudes. But
Bill, you're incredibly blessed with a support system, but this show may be going out to a young man in I'll pick a state. It wouldn't be Mississippi that I pick. Well, yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about a young person in Mississippi going through what you went through. How would they tend to get a support system if it doesn't exist for them?
Okay, that's really tough. But, the first thing I would say, I would encourage them to search on the Internet, because just to learn more about...
Not just Mississippi, by the way, all over the country. Predominantly, you would think the South, the Midwest wouldn't be the quickest to pick up, but anywhere.
But I think just searching out general information on the subject of gender identity and gender transition, but then, search for your community. And maybe, because I've heard even in small town communities, there are often, communities that you wouldn't think would be accepting. There are support and information groups. Maybe if that young person, if they don't feel comfortable with approaching a parent, perhaps they do have a clergy person or a school counselor or some other trusted adult that they can confide in. And I know that has to be chosen with real care, but, I think we're living in a day.
Fortunate to be going through some counseling to help you.
Yes.
We might recommend to these people skip the intermediate steps and get the counseling early on. Do you think that would help a lot?
Yeah, if they have access to it, like for instance, in our communities, we have 4 school-based health centers, and one in each of the high schools. And I know those don't exist everywhere, but here they do. And not only do they offer physical health care, they offer access to therapists, as well. And so, that might be something to explore. But one thing that kind of gives me hope, as a county commissioner, and this might be a little bit of a long story, but I think it's valuable to show that I really think that people, even of a conservative bent politically, are maybe, veering more toward a libertarian attitude on social issues, even if, as long as people aren't harming another person. Because a friend of mine overheard a conversation in a local electronics and gun shop, and she said the guy who was in the customer ahead of her, she was picking up some kind of electronic gear. Well, actually for a radio station that she and her husband operate, and the guy ahead of her, she hated to say, kind of what you would think of as the conservative stereotype: Carhartts, work boots, a greasy baseball cap. The fellow behind the counter happened to mention me, said, "Did you hear our county commissioner is now Claire?" And the guy behind, the customer says, "Well, no, I didn't. When my kids were growing up, I taught them that men were men and women were women." And my friend thinks, oh gosh, now here it comes. But then after a pause, this fellow slaps his hand on the counter and with a big smile on his face says, "But I figured once they became adults, they could do whatever they darn well wanted to do."
Whoa.
So,
nice.
I know there's still hatred and prejudice out there. All I have to do, because I am a public figure in my region, is look at some social media comments. I mean, I've been called a pervert. I've been told I better stay out of the women's room. I've been told I've been mentally ill, that I'm mentally ill. I mean, you name it, all the stupid, ignorant, hateful things that get directed against trans people. But, this is the luck of the position I'm in, and this is why when kind people like you say I'm courageous, it doesn't feel courageous to me, not only because I'm doing what I needed to do for peace of mind, but because, that stupidity has been drowned out by just this avalanche of love and support. One question you haven't asked that a lot of people have asked me, is it an age thing? And, are younger people more accepting? And I think, younger people do tend to be very accepting, but because I've been here so long, I know a lot of people who, are probably were my age when I moved here, but are in their 80s now, and they come up to me and offer big hugs and handshakes and tell me how happy they are, and also say something like, I feel so glad that I'm living in it. I've lived long enough to see a time when this is accepted and embraced. So, I know that not everybody is going to.
I can't tell you how happy I am for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Your voice, it just shines through. Your joy shines through in your voice.
Yep.
Wow. Would you keep coming back and check in with me every now and again? And next time we'll talk baseball. And
happy to.
Beautiful.
Thank
you again so much, Claire, for being you.
Thank you, Ralph. A pleasure,
right.
as always.
We will talk again real soon. If you're out there, do me a favor. Do me a big favor. If you enjoy this offering or any of our offerings, box up some lightly used or even new children's books and take them to the Head Start program wherever you are. Kids need to read. They need to develop an imagination. They need to take their noses out of the computers and the devices, and they need to become school ready. And kids in the Head Start program need it more than anyone. So get those books to them wherever you are. They'll be very well appreciated. Thank you from everybody from the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network for that. I'll be back as the spirit moves me. How about that? See ya. Bye.